Captain Marlowe Vox squinted at the holographic display flickering above the grimy table. A needle-thin line danced erratically over the screen, tracing the path of humanity's descent into chaos. "So, we're screwed," she announced, her voice a dry scrape like sandpaper over metal. The words hung in the stale air of the bunker, heavy as one of those antique lead paperweights, pointless and crushing. Riker Torv, the esteemed tech genius whose brilliance was often overshadowed by his inability to find a matching pair of socks, leaned back in his chair. "Screwed? No, Marlowe. We're not just screwed. We're blasted out the airlock without a suit and told to hold our breath." He adjusted his cracked glasses with a finger, the gesture as habitual as his sarcasm. Lena Quill, the strategist with a penchant for causticity that could strip paint, tapped her nails on the table. "Galactic Council's sanctions. They couldn't have just sent us a fruit basket, could they? Always with the doomsday measures." She sighed, a noise that sounded like she just witnessed a ship collision in slow motion. The bunker shook slightly, another tremor from the mining operations beneath them, or maybe the planet itself groaning under the weight of the Council's disdain. Europa wasn't exactly prime real estate, but it was home. For now. "Let's run through the essentials," Marlowe said, resetting the display with a flick of her wrist. "We've got dwindling supplies, no reinforcements, and a bunch of scientists who couldn't fight off an angry kitten." Her eyes darted to Riker, who was currently trying to untangle a mess of wires that seemed to be fighting back. "Hey, those kittens have claws," Riker muttered, finally giving up on the wires with a defeated huff. "And budgets," Lena added. "Sharp budgets." There was a brief silence as everyone considered that grim reality, starved wallets that bled red ink instead of money. Marlowe let out a breath she didn't remember holding. "We need to figure out what these sanctions actually mean. They're vague as hell, like some interstellar fortune cookie." Lena nodded, flicking a stray lock of hair from her eyes. "Beware of unexpected events. Yeah, that's helpful." "Maybe next time they can send a cryptic horoscope," Riker snorted. "You will meet a tall, dark stranger with a fleet of warships. How comforting." Suddenly, the lights flickered, a not-so-subtle reminder of their precarious situation. "Backup generators are on their last legs," Marlowe noted. "And I don't mean slow running. I mean geriatric marathon runner level. So, what's the Council's brilliant plan?" "Starve us out. Blockade until we beg for mercy," Riker asked, picking up a half-eaten protein bar from the table, examining it suspiciously, then deciding it wasn't worth the risk. "Starve us first, then blockade," Marlowe corrected, scanning through a list of emergency protocols that seemed as useful as a chocolate spacesuit. "Mercy doesn't factor into it." Lena leaned back, folding her arms across her chest. "They think we're too stubborn to die quickly. They've got a point." "Stubbornness is a human trait," Riker agreed, tapping at his datapad. "Right up there with stupidity and inventiveness." "Speaking of which," Marlowe interjected, "any inventive ideas on how to make this mess less messy?" Riker set the datapad down with a sigh. "How about we invent a time machine, go back and make sure the Council's ancestors never meet? Or we could just blow up the moon," Lena suggested dryly. "Always an option." "Well, before we resort to lunar demolition, let's consider what we've got," Marlowe said, shifting the display to show resource allocations. "We're running low on just about everything. Food, medical supplies, patience." The mention of patience drew a collective groan from the team. It was as short in supply as the air they breathed, recycled so many times it felt like trying to inhale through a damp sock. "We need intel," Lena said, leaning forward with a glint in her eye. "Real, solid intel on what the Council's planning beyond these sanctions." "I could try hacking into their systems," Riker offered. Marlowe raised an eyebrow. "You think you can get in without them noticing?" Riker shrugged, a motion that spoke volumes of overconfidence. "Of course. It's like picking a lock with a sledgehammer. Subtlety isn't my forte." "Then you'll fit right in," Lena quipped. "Speaking of fitting in," Marlowe said, gesturing to the cramped quarters, "maybe we should think about relocating." "This place is as secure as a sieve in a rainstorm," Lena nodded. There's an old mining colony further south, abandoned since the Great Ore crash. Right, Marlowe said, because nothing says safe haven like a ghost town on Europa. It's better than sitting here waiting for the council to stomp us flat, Lena countered. Riker tapped his chin thoughtfully. Could be worth a look. Plus, I hear the ghosts are friendly this time of year. A loud crash echoed through the bunker, something heavy and metallic falling from above. The ceiling held barely, dust raining down like so much cosmic dandruff. But really, who needs a roof, right? Riker added, brushing debris from his hair. Marlowe grimaced. All right, we'll head out first thing tomorrow. Check out this colony of yours. Tomorrow? Riker asked, raising an eyebrow. Planning a farewell party for tonight? No, Marlowe smirked. Just making sure we have enough night left to regret this decision. The team settled back into their routine, the ever-present tension like a third wheel at a bad date. Outside, Europa's icy winds howled against the bunker walls, an ominous symphony to their desperate, whispered plans. Riker tapped away at his datapad, occasionally muttering curses at uncooperative code. Lena was busy poring over maps, eyes like a hawk scanning for prey. Marlowe watched them both, mind spinning wheels she hoped wouldn't lose traction. Hey, Marlowe, Riker called, voice echoing slightly off the bunker walls. Yeah, he held up his screen, grinning like a kid with a new toy. I think I found something. Away into the Council's comms network. Might be able to intercept some transmissions, get a read on their next moves. Marlowe's interest peaked. And how illegal is this little maneuver? On a scale of jaywalking to planetary genocide. Probably somewhere around Grand Theft Starship, he replied, tapping a few keys. Good, Marlowe said. I was worried you'd gone soft. She shot Lena a look. Think you can whip up some contingency plans based on whatever we find? Lena smiled, a thin, dangerous curve of her lips. Already on it, Cap, Marlowe nodded, feeling a flicker of hope amid the gloom. All right, let's see what secrets the Council's been hiding. The Iors crept by, the team working in near silence, interrupted only by the occasional snarky comment to lighten the oppressive tension. Finally, as Riker's screen pinged happily, the silence broke with a collective sigh. Got it, he announced, eyes bright with triumph. We're in. Marlowe and Lena crowded around the display, the air thick with anticipation. The screen filled with lines of data, encrypted messages, and a smattering of intercepted comms. Looks like they're planning something big, Riker muttered, scrolling through the information. A full blockade around Earth. No ships in or out, Lena swore softly. They're trying to choke us out. Marlowe's face hardened, resolve setting in like stone. Then we make sure they choke on it. How so? Riker asked, eyebrows raised. We get creative, make their lives difficult, she replied. If they're expecting us to roll over and die, they are in for one hell of a surprise. Riker grinned. Nothing like a bit of chaos to start the day. Lena smirked. Or end it. The bunker settled into a tentative calm, the team briefly united in their defiance against the Council's oppressive grip. Outside, the winds continued their mournful song, a reminder of the frozen world they called home. All right, let's get some rest, Marlowe said, standing and stretching. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. The team dispersed, each retreating to their makeshift quarters. Marlowe remained for a moment, staring at the now idle display, her mind racing with possibilities and plans. Defiance was a dangerous game, but as far as games went, it was the only one humanity had left to play. With a final glance at the flickering screen, she turned away, ready to face whatever came next. The bunker had the ambience of a morgue, minus the cheery quiet. Captain Marlowe Vox strode in, boots clinking on the cold metal floor. She found Lena Quill in her usual spot, hunched over a map that promised more hope than it delivered, while Riker Torv was elbow-deep in a tangle of wires that looked like the universe threw up its insides. So what's our situation? Marlowe asked, her voice slicing through the stagnation like a knife that desperately needed sharpening. Lena didn't look up, her eyes a hawk's, scanning every potential escape route that led nowhere worth going. Well, the good news is we're not dead, and the bad news, Marlowe prompted, bracing for the inevitable kick in the teeth. The Galactic Council's sanctions mean Earth's now about as well-stocked as a monastery with a no-alcohol policy, Lena replied, a dry smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. No food, no tech, nothing that would make life less of a soul-sucking experience. Riker glanced up, his hair standing at angles that defined gravity's disinterest, which explains why my breakfast tasted like a dictionary's index. Bland and hard to swallow, Marlowe crossed her arms, her mind a battlefield of calculated optimism and creeping dread. And the Council plans to do what exactly? Sit tight and watch us cannibalize ourselves, pretty much, Lena said, leaning back with the kind of sigh you'd find in the defeated section of an encyclopedia. But there's more. Riker, show her what you found. Riker tapped at his datapad with the enthusiasm of a man unlocking a mystery box, hoping it wasn't full of scorpions. Remember that little joyride we took through the Council's comms network? Turns out they're not just stopping at starving us out. Joyride, Marlowe repeated, a smirk playing on her lips. Because nothing screams fun like galactic espionage. Riker grinned, the kind that said he knew exactly what he was doing and it probably wasn't legal. Seems like they're planning to seize strategic positions on Earth. You know, just in case starving us out doesn't do the trick fast enough. Marlowe's eyes narrowed, her pulse quickening at the notion of adding insult to injury. So when plan A of slow, painful death hits a snag, they move to plan B, hostile takeover. How original, Lena nodded, her expression a mixture of bitterness and grudging admiration. They're thorough, I'll give them that. It's like they're playing chess while we're stuck with checkers. Missing pieces and all, yeah. And we're the pawns they've set on fire for a bit of fun, Riker added, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Marlowe stared at the flickering holographic display, the planet below looking more like a target than a home. All right, so we've got a potential invasion on top of economic strangulation. It's like Christmas, but someone stole the tree and set fire to the presents. We're going to need a miracle, Lena said, her voice edged with a resigned steel. Or a really good plan, Marlowe exhaled sharply, determination hardening her features. Then let's make one. We need to alert Earth, get them ready for the incoming shitstorm. Riker shot her a look that was half incredulous, half manic. And how do you propose we do that? With the Council having ears bigger than our budget deficit, Marlowe gave a tight smile. We go old school. Radio frequencies encrypted. Something they won't expect because it's too primitive to bother with. Because when in doubt, use technology 2 centuries out of date, Riker quipped. Got it. Lena tapped her fingers in thought, the rhythm like a countdown to their impending doom. And we need to figure out how to make Earth less appealing. If they want those strategic points, they'll have to fight for them. Fight for what? Marlowe asked. A bunch of starving civilians and outdated tech. Exactly, Lena replied, her eyes gleaming with mischief that bordered on dangerous. We make it look like Earth's more of a hassle than it's worth. Turn their prize into a liability. Riker chuckled, shaking his head. I always said you were a genius, Lena, but this is special. A discount sale on despair with a side of go screw yourself. Marlowe nodded, the plan forming in her mind like a storm cloud, ominous, unpredictable, and full of potential havoc. All right. Riker, you work on the transmissions. Lena, figure out how to make Earth look like the worst vacation spot in the galaxy. You got it, Cap, Riker said, already pulling up schematics and frequencies like a kid with a fresh set of toys. And if the Council catches wind? Lena asked, one eyebrow raised in a question that was more rhetorical than genuine. Marlowe shrugged. We'll cross that bridge when we're getting shot at on it. The bunker buzzed with renewed urgency, the kind that thrived in desperation. Riker buried himself in technology older than his grandparents, while Lena plotted the kind of deception that would make con artists weep. Hours passed in a blur of activity, the bunker's atmosphere shifting from stagnant to electric. Marlowe paced like a caged lion, monitoring progress and trying not to think about the inevitable fallout if things went sideways. Riker finally looked up, a triumphant gleam in his eye. Got it. The signals are ready to go. Now we just need to hope someone's listening on the other end. Marlowe nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. And Lena, almost there, Lena replied, her voice a testament to focus and resolve. Just fine-tuning the details. It'll take a miracle for the Council to see through this smoke and mirrors. Miracles we can do, Marlowe said, her tone a mixture of irony and defiant hope. The impossible just takes a little longer. Riker's fingers danced over his datapad, sending the encrypted signals into the void with a silent plea for help. And done. Message sent. Now we pray. Lena finished her work, sitting back with a sigh that spoke of exhaustion and satisfaction. Earth should look like an interstellar dump by the time we're through. If the Council wants it, they'll have to sift through the garbage. Perfect, Marlowe said. Now we wait, and wait they did, each minute stretching into an eternity while the universe continued its indifferent march forward. Outside, Europa's winds howled a dirge to the frozen land, unknowing or uncaring of the drama unfolding within. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime but was really only a few hours, Riker's datapad chirped with an incoming transmission. Marlowe's heart leapt into her throat as Riker read the message, his face breaking into a grin that could rival the sun. We've got a response. Earth's mobilizing. They're not going to go down without a fight. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank the stars. Maybe we have a chance after all. Marlowe couldn't help but smile, a fierce, defiant thing that dared the universe to try and crush them. All right then, let's gear up. If the Council wants a war, we'll give them one hell of a battle. Riker leaned back, a contented sigh escaping his lips. I love it when a crazy plan comes together. Almost makes you forget how screwed we are, Lena chuckled, shaking her head. Almost, with their course set, the team prepared for the fight of their lives. Marlowe felt the weight of leadership settle over her like an old, familiar coat, heavy, but comforting in its own way. They might not have had much in terms of resources or firepower, but they had something far more valuable: resolve, grit, and a stubborn refusal to lie down and die. As they finalized their plans, the bunker seemed to hum with anticipation, the walls reverberating with the spirit of defiance. Outside, the icy winds raged on, indifferent to the struggle within. But inside, hope flickered like a candle in the darkness, fragile yet resilient. Let's show them what humanity's made of, Marlowe said, her voice steady, her resolve unbreakable. The team nodded, a silent vow passing between them. They would stand together, fight together, and rise to meet whatever challenges lay ahead. Because in the end, they were human. And humans, as history had proven, were notoriously difficult to kill. Riker was hunched over a mess of wires and cobbled together tech that, if you squinted right, could almost pass for a working station. Almost. It was the kind of setup that would make a health and safety officer weep tears of pure despair. So, what's the miracle device? Lena asked, peering over Riker's shoulder with the kind of skepticism reserved for used car salesmen and miracle diets. Riker tapped a piece of tech that looked like it had been through 3 wars and a Black Friday sale. Meet the subspace interference generator, or, as I like to call it, the galactic pain in the ass. With this, we can scramble the Council's comms long enough to make our move. Sounds. Reliable, Lena replied, her voice as dry as a desert in a drought. About as reliable as a second-hand parachute, Riker shot back, grinning. But it's the best we've got. Marlowe folded her arms, her gaze shrewd and calculating. And what does making our move entail exactly? We light up their sensors like a holiday parade, making them think Earth just turned into the universe's biggest trouble spot. Draw their attention away from their actual targets by turning us into a target. Lena interjected, eyebrows shooting up like they were trying to escape her forehead. Bold move. I guess subtlety was never your forte, Riker. Riker shrugged, the picture of nonchalance. Subtlety's overrated. Besides, I'm more of a go big or go home kind of guy. And since we can't go home, so we're betting on chaos. Marlowe leaned against the cold metal wall, its chill seeping through her jacket like a bad omen. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, Lena answered, her voice a melody of sarcasm and alarming truth. But if we pull it off, we might just buy Earth enough time to get its act together. Marlowe's lips twitched, a hint of a smile ghosting across her face. And here I thought you'd be the voice of reason. I tried that once, Lena replied with a mock shiver. Didn't suit me, they all chuckled, a brief respite from the encroaching dread. Even in the face of annihilation, Gallo's humor was their most reliable ally. I'm not saying it's foolproof, Riker admitted, rubbing the back of his neck with a nervous energy. Hell, it's barely fool-resistant, but it's something. And something's better than nothing, usually, Lena agreed. Unless that something's Riker's cooking. Hey, Riker protested, feigning indignation. I'll have you know that my nutrient-paced casserole is a hit in at least 2 sectors. Yeah, the 2 sectors where taste buds are considered a luxury, Lena retorted. Marlowe silenced them with a raised hand, her eyes losing their mirth. All right, if we're doing this, let's get it done. Everyone know your roles, Riker nodded, his enthusiasm rivaling a puppy that hadn't yet discovered the vet. I'll handle the tech. Make sure they think Earth sprouted a dozen new volcanoes and maybe a few alien cults. Lena. Marlowe turned to her strategist, who was already lost in thought, her fingers drumming a restless beat against her thigh. I'll work on the contingency plans. Just in case. In case of what? Riker asked, curiosity piqued. In case becomes a screaming, flaming reality, Lena answered grimly. We're not exactly equipped to deal with the Council's version of a welcoming committee. Marlowe nodded, satisfied. Good. Let's get to it. As Riker returned to his makeshift control panel, Marlowe caught a flicker of doubt in Lena's expression. It was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual steely resolve, but it lingered in Marlowe's mind like a ghost. Something on your mind? Marlowe asked, keeping her voice low. Lena hesitated, her eyes searching Marlowe's for permission to speak freely. Just wondering if we're missing something. The Council's thorough, but even they have blind spots. Marlowe's interest piqued. Go on. Lena leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. I went through some old intel. There's a pattern in the Council's movements, something they always overlook, which is their own arrogance, Lena replied, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous kind of hope. They're so convinced of their superiority, they never expect anyone to actually outsmart them. Seems like a stretch, Marlowe said, but there was intrigue in her tone. Maybe, but if we play into that, we might find a crack in their plans. A vulnerability. Riker, who had been eavesdropping with all the subtlety of a hungry cat, chimed in. So you're saying we make them underestimate us? Exactly, Lena confirmed. They think we're desperate. Let them. Marlowe considered this, her mind racing with possibilities. All right, we use that. Keep him guessing. Make them think we're scrambling when we're actually playing the long game. Works for me, Riker said, returning to his mess of wires with renewed vigor. If there's one thing I love about these snobs, it's their underestimation of the little guy. All right, everyone knows what to do, Marlowe said, her voice carrying the weight of command. Let's make history. Hours passed in a blur of hurried preparation and whispered debates, each team member trapped in their own whirlwind of thoughts and fears. The bunker was alive with the sound of clattering tools and the soft hum of recalibrating machinery. Riker worked with fevered intensity, trying to coax life from the ancient devices in front of him. His fingers moved with precision and speed, but his mind wandered, doubting. What if this was all for nothing? What if they were just delaying the inevitable? Lena was similarly lost in her own world, plotting strategies and contingencies with ruthless efficiency. Her mind was a steel trap, catching every nuance, every potential outcome, but lurking beneath her composed exterior was doubt. The nagging suspicion that maybe they were biting off more than they could chew. Marlowe, ever the leader, was a picture of calm focus. She prowled the bunker like a tiger in a cage, checking in with her team, offering reassurances and directions. But inside, she too battled with uncertainty. The weight of responsibility was heavy, and the knife edge of doubt was ever present. Despite their internal struggles, the team worked like a well-oiled machine, driven by a singular purpose: survival. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the pieces were in place. Riker stood back from his creation, his face a mask of triumph and trepidation. "All right, it's ready. Time to see if this thing sings or just blows up in our faces." Marlowe nodded, her expression unreadable. "Fire it up." Riker took a deep breath, his finger hovering over the ignition switch. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, then flipped the switch. There was a tense moment of silence, the kind that stretched nerves to breaking point. Then, with a sputter and a groan, the cobbled-together machinery came to life, emitting a low hum that resonated through the bunker. "Well, it didn't explode," Riker said, relief evident in his voice. Yet Lena leaned over, checking the readings with a critical eye. "Looks like it's working. The interference is spreading. Let's hope it does the trick." Marlowe allowed a small smile, a rare sign of approval. "Good work, both of you. Now we wait." Minutes crawled by, each second a study in suspense and anxiety. Riker paced like a caged beast, while Lena sat still as a statue, her mind racing with calculations and contingencies. Then the comms crackled to life, a burst of static followed by a voice, human, frantic, and unmistakably desperate. "This is Resistance Command. We're receiving your signal. What's your status?" Marlowe snatched up the mic, her voice steady despite the storm within. "Resistance Command, this is Captain Marlowe Vox. We've initiated an interference protocol. Are you seeing any openings on your end?" "Affirmative, Captain," the voice responded. "The Council's scrambling to make sense of it. Your signal's got them in a tizzy." Riker punched the air, a silent cheer of victory. Lena allowed herself a smile too, though her eyes remained sharp, ever watchful. "Good," Marlowe said into the mic. "Keep them on their toes. We'll hold as long as we can." "Roger that, Captain." Resistance Command out. As the comms fell silent, the team exchanged glances, a mix of relief and apprehension. They'd taken the first step, an act of defiance that sent ripples through the Council's carefully constructed plans. "Nice job, Riker," Lena said, her voice softer than usual. "You might just make a hero out of yourself." Riker grinned, though it was tinged with a shadow of doubt. "Or a martyr. Time will tell." Marlowe straightened, her resolve hardening into something unbreakable. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. We've bought some time, and now we make it count. No matter what." With the Council momentarily on the back foot, the team refocused on their next steps. Each knew the fight was far from over. The battle for Earth's future was just beginning, and it was one they intended to win, even if it killed them. Because as far as they were concerned, it was better to die on their feet than live on their knees. And if the Council wanted a war, well, they just found their perfect adversaries. The bunker was quieter than a tomb after the initial burst of activity. A silence so thick you could carve it with a rusty spoon. The glow of Riker's jury-rigged machinery cast long shadows, dancing like grim specters over metal walls. The team knew this was just the calm before the inevitable shitstorm. "All right, what's next on the suicide mission checklist?" Riker asked, leaning back against a console, wiping sweat from his brow. "Explosive decompression. Alien invasion. Maybe we'll just get lucky and have a nice asteroid plow into us." "Charming," Lena said dryly, eyes never leaving the holographic display. "I'm voting for the alien invasion. At least they might bring something new to complain about." Marlowe was less amused, her eyes narrowed in thought. "Focus. We've got a window thanks to Riker's creation," she said, gesturing at the humming setup. "Time to exploit it before the Council realizes we're not just sending them a prank call." Lena nodded, her fingers flying over her datapad. She was tracing every conceivable escape route, plotting contingencies for contingencies. Paranoia was an art form she had mastered long ago. "I'll keep an eye on their movements. They panic, we move." The tension was thick enough to choke on, and no one dared break it with false reassurances. Instead, they let the silence settle back in, each trapped in their own thoughts of impending doom. Well, just a quiet day at the office, Riker quipped, but his laugh was hollow, echoing in the space like a ghostly reminder of their predicament. It was then that a new sound entered the mix, a soft beeping, subtle but persistent, like a mosquito buzzing in your ear at 3 a.m. Riker frowned, leaning forward to examine the source. "That's odd," he muttered, poking the console like it had personally offended him. "What's odd?" Marlowe asked, already moving behind him, her gaze sharp like a hawk spotting prey. "It's a calm ping from inside the bunker," Riker said, disbelief coloring his voice. "Someone's sending out a signal." Lena stiffened, her eyes narrowing into slits of suspicion. "Who the hell's gonna send a distress signal from our nice little death trap?" Riker shrugged, his face an open book of confusion and worry. "Beats me. Unless one of us is moonlighting as a traitor." Now they were all on high alert, eyes darting suspiciously around the bunker. Trust was a luxury none of them could afford, but betrayal, that was a whole different beast. "We need to find out who's behind this," Marlowe said, her voice as hard as steel. Fast. Suddenly, the bunker didn't feel like just a hideout anymore. It felt like a cage, and someone was rattling the bars. The team was on edge, each of them wondering if the enemy wasn't out there but right beside them. Riker turned back to his console, fingers flying over the keys like a mad composer. "I'm trying to trace the signal," he said, voice tense. "Give me a minute." Lena crossed her arms, her expression a mask of cool detachment. "Could be a misfire," she suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. "Sure, and maybe pigs fly and the council sends us apology fruit baskets," Riker shot back, though the humor was lost amidst the tension. Marlowe watched the exchange, her mind working overtime to calculate the odds, weigh the risks, consider every move on this twisted chessboard. If there's a traitor, we need to know their game. "And fast." "Got it," Riker declared, his face lighting up with a mix of triumph and apprehension. "The signal's coming from. Holy hell, it's from right here in the comms room." "Convenient," Lena said, the sarcasm dripping from her words like poison from a snake's fangs. Anyone else feeling like they are in a bad thriller holoflick? Marlowe wasted no time. "All right, we're locking this place down. Nobody in or out till we dig up the mole." A sense of dread settled over them. They might have been prepared for the council's wrath, but treachery from one of their own, that was a whole different flavor of betrayal. As they worked to secure the room, each of them couldn't help but cast sidelong glances at the others. Riker's mind raced. What had he missed? Lena was already 2 steps ahead, considering every possible scenario. And Marlowe, ever the captain, was trying to keep the ship from sinking under this new storm. Why now? Lena wondered aloud, though her question was directed more at herself than anyone else. Why sabotage us now, when we've finally got a leg up? Maybe they're hedging their bets, Riker suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. Could be someone's idea of an insurance policy. Marlowe shook her head. "Only policy we need is to survive and send the council packing." The comms crackled again, a reminder that time was against them. "Resistance command, urgent update required." "Status." Marlowe shot Riker a look that screamed stall them, and he nodded, grabbing the mic. "Resistance command, we're experiencing minor technical difficulties." "Sit tight." As Riker ad-libbed excuses, Marlowe turned her focus back to the immediate problem, the traitor. "No more games. We need answers." Lena was already on it, her datapad a blur of activity. "I'm accessing the comm logs, checking for anomalies. If there's something there, I'll find it." The comm room felt like the eye of a hurricane, calm but with chaos swirling just beyond the walls. Each beep and click of the console was a countdown to disaster. "Got something," Lena said finally, her eyes narrowing. "There's a secondary access point to the comms. Someone's piggybacking our signal. Can you shut it down?" Marlowe asked, urgency creeping into her voice. "Working on it," Lena replied, fingers dancing over the controls. "But whoever's behind this knows their stuff. It's like trying to untangle a ball of rogue wire in 0G. Perfect," Riker muttered. "We're up against a ghost." Marlowe stared at the holographic display, the flickering lights reflecting off her eyes like distant stars. They had come too far and risked too much to be brought down by a hidden enemy. All right, let's think this through. We find the source, we cut them off. Simple like performing brain surgery with a spork, Riker quipped, though his grin was more grimace. Despite the tension, Lena found herself smirking. Good thing we're professionals then. It was a small moment, a flicker of light amidst the gathering storm. But it reminded them of what they were fighting for, each other, their planet, and the slim chance of a future not dictated by fear and subjugation. Minutes ticked by, each feeling like an eternity. The team was a well-oiled machine, but even machines had breaking points, and theirs was creaking under the pressure. Finally, Lena let out a triumphant exhale. Got it. Traced the source back to an old relay hidden under the ops deck. Sneaky bastard must have been planning this for a while. Well, let's go introduce ourselves, Marlowe said, her voice as cold and sharp as a space knife. Riker, you're with me. Lena, keep an eye on the system. If anything else pops up, I want to know. Roger that, Lena replied, her focus already returning to the screens. As Marlowe and Riker made their way to the ops deck, the air between them crackled with intent. Both knew this confrontation could end in discovery or disaster. The corridor stretched ahead, lined with shadows that seemed to breathe with malicious intent. Marlowe led the way, her movements a study in controlled aggression. Riker followed, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. As they reached the ops deck, Riker shot Marlowe a sidelong glance. So, what's the plan when we find our little saboteur? Offer them a cup of tea and a stern talking to. Marlowe's lips quirked into a humorless smile. Something like that. The ops deck was dimly lit, a perfect place for secrets to hide. Riker's gaze swept over the consoles, searching for the telltale signs of tampering. There, Marlowe said, pointing at a corner console. The panel had been subtly pried open, wires spilling out like the guts of some forgotten beast. Riker knelt beside it, his technician instincts kicking in. Looks like someone's been playing Operation. Give me a sec. As Riker worked to dismantle the makeshift relay, Marlowe kept a watchful eye on the room, senses on high alert. The traitor could be anywhere, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Got it, Riker said, holding up a small device that looked like a hybrid between a datapad and a detonator. This is what's been piggybacking our signal. Marlowe took it, her eyes narrowing at the intricate web of circuits and wires. Any idea who? Riker shook his head. Could have been anyone. Hell, they could have rigged this ages ago, just waiting for the right moment. Well, they picked the wrong moment, Marlowe said, her voice as hard as the metal walls surrounding them. Let's get back. We've got to keep our heads in the game. They returned to the calm room, the weight of their discovery hanging over them like a dark cloud. Lena was waiting, her expression a mix of relief and suspicion. Find anything? She asked, though her eyes said she already knew the answer. Just a little surprise package, Riker replied, holding up the device. Someone's been playing both sides and they're damn good at it. Great, Lena said, sarcasm dripping from every syllable. Just what we needed. More complications. Marlowe placed the device on the console, her mind racing with possibilities. We keep this under wraps. If there's a traitor, they don't know we're onto them, and if they strike again. Riker asked, his voice edged with tension. Then we'll be ready, Marlowe said, her gaze steely and determined. We've come this far, and I'm not about to let some backstabber ruin our chances. As they returned to their tasks, the air in the bunker was charged with a new kind of energy. They were still on the knife's edge, but now there was a sense of purpose, an understanding that they were in this together, come hell or high water. And as far as they were concerned, they'd take on the whole damn Galactic Council if it meant keeping their planet free, because even in the darkest of times they had each other, and that was enough. The bunker felt tighter than a miser's wallet, and about as welcoming. Marlowe leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the flickering holographic display like it owed her money. Her team was a cocktail of fatigue, frustration, and fear, shaken, not stirred. Europa's was an ugly truth, slapstick comedy in a world where the punchline could kill you. Any word from the council? Marlowe asked, more to see if anyone was still awake than out of genuine curiosity. She knew the answer: static silence, the kind you'd expect from a tomb or a really boring funeral. Lena, eyes buried in the datapad, muttered something that sounded suspiciously like a curse. Nope, still as chatty as a mute goldfish. Riker snorted, his laugh dry as the Sahara. Guess they're busy plotting our obliteration. You know, work-life balance. Speaking of which, how's the tech looking? Marlowe asked, aiming for hope and landing somewhere between skepticism and gallows humor. Riker grimaced, like she'd asked him to solve the meaning of life using a spoon and a rubber band. Well, our jury-rigged mess is holding up about as well as a paper umbrella in a monsoon. That little sabotage stunt messed with the core systems more than I thought. The words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. They all knew what it meant. Earth was as exposed as a streaker at a football match, and just as likely to get tackled. So we're basically screwed. Lena's voice was flat, the kind of monotone that said she'd already accepted their fate and found it wanting. Not entirely, Marlowe said, trying to inject some steel into her words. We've still got the subspace interference generator. That's our best shot to keep them guessing. Riker chuckled, dark, humorless. Yeah, until it decides to hiccup and explode in our faces. It's as stable as a caffeine addict on withdrawal. Marlowe rubbed her temples, feeling the migraine forming like a storm on the horizon. The subspace interference generator was supposed to be their ace in the hole. Instead, it was acting more like the Joker, ready to blow up the whole deck. Options, she asked, knowing damn well there weren't many. Pray. Riker offered with a half-smile. Heard it worked wonders back in the day. Right, because divine intervention is right up there with our strategic objectives, Lena said, sarcasm dripping from her words like venom. Look, whatever happens, we need to test that generator, Marlowe insisted, her voice firm. If it works, it'll buy us time to figure out the mole and patch things up, or it'll short-circuit and make us the galaxy's latest fireworks display, Riker quipped. Hell, might even be entertaining. Marlowe allowed herself a thin smile. I'll take entertaining over dead any day. The bunker's silence was oppressive, like being stuck in a library with no books and a particularly strict librarian. The team felt it in their bones, the weight of each decision, the razor's edge they balanced upon. All right, let's fire this thing up, Riker said, pulling himself away from the console with the enthusiasm of a man headed for his own execution. Worst case, we end up cosmic dust, right? Let's aim for a slightly less dramatic outcome, Marlowe said, standing to join him. Lena, keep monitoring comms. If anything or anyone makes a move, I want to know. Lena nodded, returning her attention to the datapad with the focus of a hawk eyeing its next meal. Got it. I'll keep an ear out for any whispers of doom. They moved to the corner of the room where the generator loomed, a hulking mass of wires and blinking lights. It looked like the bastard child of a transformer and a Christmas tree, and about as trustworthy. Ready? Riker asked, fingers hovering over the controls like a pianist about to play a particularly tricky concerto. Do it, Marlowe replied, crossing her arms and bracing for impact. Riker flipped the switch, and the machine roared to life, an angry, snarling beast, vibrating with barely contained energy. The lights flickered, and the air hummed with a tension that set their teeth on edge. Looks like it's working, Lena called over the din, her eyes glued to the datapad. Signals are getting scrambled, Council's gonna be pissed. Riker grinned, triumphant and terrified. Let's hope that holds long enough for us to get our act together. As the minutes ticked by, the machine continued its ominous purr, a mechanical monster of their own making. But just as hope began to creep in, there was a sputter, a cough, and the generator fell silent. Ah, crap, Riker muttered, kicking the machine's base with all the frustration of a man who knows he just lost the lottery. Marlowe's heart sank. Status. Lena's fingers flew over the controls, her face a mask of concentration. We're dead in the water. No signal, no interference. Council's gonna have a field day. Great, Marlowe said, her voice as bitter as a widow's tears. So what's the plan now? Get on our knees and beg for mercy. Could always offer them Lena's cooking, Riker suggested with a wry smile. That'd scare anyone off. Lena shot him a look that promised violence. Keep that up and I'll make sure your dinner next. Focus, people, Marlowe snapped, dragging them back from the brink of pointless banter. We've got to keep fighting. We need to find that mole before they sell us out completely. Her words hung in the air, a grim reminder of just how precarious their position was. They had few allies, fewer resources, and the Council breathing down their necks with all the subtlety of a hungry wolf. Riker sighed, rubbing his temples. I'll see if I can get this heap of junk back online. But no promises. As he bent over the machine, tools in hand, Lena turned to Marlowe. Any bright ideas? Or are we just gonna wing it and hope for the best? Marlowe considered for a moment, her mind racing through possibilities like a gambler with one last chip. We keep our heads down, keep working. And if we get a chance, we take it. No hesitation, sounds like a plan, Lena said, though her voice lacked any real conviction. For a moment, silence reigned, the three of them lost in their own thoughts. Then Riker let out a low whistle. I think I've got something. Might not hold, but it should give us a bit more time. Marlowe felt a flicker of hope. How long? Riker shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. Long enough to get us into deeper trouble, I reckon. Good, Marlowe said with a nod. Trouble's where we thrive. The team had always been at their best when things were at their worst. Maybe it was the adrenaline, maybe it was the thrill of the fight, or maybe it was just sheer stubbornness. Whatever it was, they'd need all of it and more to make it through the coming storm. As they worked, the oppressive weight of their situation pressed down on them. The Council loomed large in the background, their reach long and their patience short. But Marlowe knew one thing for certain. As long as they could, they'd fight. Remember, she said, breaking the silence, we've got each other's backs. No matter what happens, we stick together. Riker raised a hand in mock salute. To the bitter end, Captain, or until Lena poisons us all, Marlowe added with a grin. Lena shook her head, smiling despite herself. Please, I save my cooking for special occasions, like the end of the world. The laughter that followed was brief but genuine, a shared moment of levity amidst the chaos. They were a team, a family bound by circumstance and necessity. And though the future looked grim, they faced it with the same resolve that had carried them this far. In the end, they were fighting for more than just survival. They were fighting for each other, for their planet, and for the slim chance of a future not ruled by fear. And as the Iors dragged on, they continued to fight, against the odds, against the darkness, and against the traitor in their midst. Because that's what it meant to be human, to cling to hope in the face of despair, and to defy the stars themselves if need be. After all, what else was there? The bunker was as silent as a graveyard at midnight, with the oppressive atmosphere of a forgotten crypt. Marlowe Vox paced like a caged tiger, her mind darting between improbable plans and impossible outcomes. Riker, ever the reluctant technician, was hunched over the subspace interference generator, muttering to himself as he poked at the entrails of wires and circuits. Lena Quill sat to the side, eyes glued to her datapad, her fingers dancing across the screen in a frantic rhythm. A little pick-me-up music wouldn't kill us, you know, Riker grumbled, his voice a gravelly mixture of sarcasm and resignation. Considering your taste, it might, Lena retorted, not looking up from her screen. Last thing we need is you serenading the Council with your eclectic playlist. Hey, Riker shot back, acting wounded. You ever heard of psychological warfare? My music's a weapon of mass destruction. Marlowe stopped her pacing, her eyes narrowing as she homed in on Lena. You find something, Quill? Lena didn't answer immediately, her brow furrowing deeper. A possible sign she was either onto something big or contemplating the universe's cruelest joke. Got a blip here, she finally said, the words carrying the weight of buried treasure. Hidden calm chatter, buried like a politician's conscience. Riker abandoned his machinery mid-insult, his interest piqued. Well, color me curious. What's the Council got their knickers in a twist about this time? Lena tapped a few more keys, the datapad humming in possible agreement. It's not just chatter. There's a pattern, coordinates, timelines, some kind of plan. Marlowe leaned in, eyes flashing with a mix of hope and anger. Their next move more like their big finish, Lena replied, the words tumbling out like a confession. Looks like they're planning to hit us hard, one final showstopper. An encore we didn't ask for, Riker muttered, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Just what we need, more fireworks. Marlowe's mind raced, the pieces clicking together with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Then we've got something they don't expect. Information's a weapon, right? Yeah, and we just found the trigger, Lena agreed, eyes still glued to the screen. This could be the break we need. Riker, ever the skeptic, glanced between them. Or it could be a really elaborate trap. You know, carrots and sticks, but with less carrot and more explosive. Marlowe's lips twisted into a wry smile. We can't afford to play it safe. Not now. We use this to rally the team, make our stand count. Lena finally looked up, determination etched into her face. You think we can turn this on them? Worst case, we go out with a bang, Marlowe replied, feeling the familiar thrill of defiance stir within her. Best case, we live to tell the tale. The bunker vibrated with a newfound energy, a sense of purpose taking root amidst the despair. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about turning the tide, about standing up and saying, not today. All right, Marlowe said, straightening up and surveying her team. Let's make them regret underestimating us. Riker gave a mock salute, though his tone was anything but jovial. Aye, aye, Captain. Let's show them what a ragtag bunch of misfits can do. Lena, keep digging into those comms. Find out everything you can about their plans, Marlowe instructed, her voice sharp and clear like a blade cutting through the fog. And what about you, fearless leader? Riker asked, a smirk playing on his lips. Gonna make a motivational speech or something? Marlowe chuckled, a sound that was more bark than laughter. Nah, I'll leave the speeches for when we're not about to be vaporized. I've got a mole to sniff out. The mention of the traitor hanging among them was a bitter reminder of their precarious situation. Trust was a luxury they couldn't afford, but suspicion was a currency they had in spades. Keep your eyes peeled, Marlowe added, her gaze hardening. Our mole's still out there, and they're not gonna sit on their hands while we stir the pot. Aye, and I'll keep this beastie, Riker nodded to the generator, from blowing us sky high, assuming it doesn't decide to do so of its own accord. Let's get to it, Marlowe said, the words clipped but charged with a sense of impending action. The air in the bunker buzzed with a tension that was almost tangible, like static electricity before a storm. They were a motley crew, held together by desperation and grit, with every moment teetering on the brink of disaster. But they were all they had, and that was enough. Lena's voice broke the silence, filled with both excitement and trepidation. Got something else? There's chatter about moving assets. Sounds like they're relocating something big. Big as in make us disappear big, or oh look, a new hole in the planet big. Riker quipped, leaning over her shoulder to get a better look. Hard to say, but it's definitely not a care package, Lena replied, her fingers tapping out a staccato beat of urgency. Marlowe considered this new piece of the puzzle, her mind weaving it into their plan. That might be our ticket. Whatever they are moving, it's important enough to be protected. It's a gamble, but if we hit it, they hit the panic button, Riker finished for her, catching on to the line of thought. Could work, or it could backfire spectacularly, Lena added, caution coloring her tone. But at this point, what have we got to lose? Exactly, Marlowe said, her voice a determined growl. We're not out of this fight yet. The team moved with determination, their actions driven by a shared sense of purpose. Each step was another toward defying the Council's seemingly insurmountable power, toward securing not just their survival but a chance to strike back. Hours passed in a blur of activity, punctuated by bouts of gallows humor and sarcastic commentary. Riker's tools clanked and clattered against the stubborn machinery, Lena deciphered the cryptic codes with laser focus, and Marlowe pored over maps and schematics, her mind a battlefield of strategies and countermeasures. In the heart of that bunker, amidst the hum of machinery and the crackle of hidden comms, they forged their resolve. The council had the resources, the numbers, and seemingly infinite reach. But Marlowe and her crew had something else, an indomitable will to survive and an uncanny knack for turning the impossible into the inevitable. They were the misfits, the unwanted, the ones left behind. But they were also the ones who wouldn't go down without a fight, who refused to bow to the tyranny of the stars. And as the clock ticked down to the council's final move, they remained undeterred, ready to face whatever came next. As the last cog fell into place, Marlowe gathered her team for what could be their final briefing. The stakes had never been higher, the odds never steeper, but with a plan in hand and a fire in their hearts, they stood ready to face the storm. "We've got one shot at this," Marlowe said, her voice carrying the weight of command. "We hit them where it hurts, disrupt their plans, and give ourselves a fighting chance." "Sounds like a recipe for disaster," Riker quipped, though his grin belied his words. "But I'm in." Lena nodded, her usual skepticism replaced by a quiet confidence. "Let's do it." The moment was charged with a sense of finality, a shared understanding of the risks and the stakes. They were outgunned, outnumbered, but not out of options. And as they prepared for the battle ahead, each of them knew that this was more than a fight for survival. It was a fight for freedom. "All right, team," Marlowe said, her voice steely with resolve. "Let's show them what we're made of." With that, they moved as one, a singular force of defiance and determination. The battle for Earth's future was about to begin, and they intended to be its unlikely heroes. As they set out into the unknown, one thing was certain. Come what may, they would face it together. And in the cold, unforgiving expanse of space, that was a victory in itself. The bunker was buzzing like a hive full of caffeine-addled bees, each of the crew members scurrying through their tasks with a frenetic energy only desperation could fuel. Marlowe Vox planted herself in front of a flickering holographic display, its ghostly light casting shadows sharper than the knives in their dwindling arsenal. It wasn't much, but it was all they had, and they intended to make it count. Riker Torv, the reluctant technician/miracle worker, hunched over his Frankensteinian creation, the subspace interference generator. The machine was jury-rigged with a level of care that suggested either madness or genius. Riker hoped it was the latter. It hummed ominously, as if aware of the monumental task it was being asked to perform. "Think it'll work?" Marlowe asked, her voice casual but her eyes sharp. Riker looked up, wiping a smear of grease across his cheek like war paint. "Define work. If you mean not blow us all to kingdom come, then I'd give it a solid maybe." "Optimism. I like it," Marlowe deadpanned, flicking her gaze to Lena Quill, who was still absorbed in her datapad like it held the secrets of the universe, or at least a really good recipe. "Quill, you find anything new?" Marlowe inquired, crossing her arms. Lena glanced up, tapping her screen one last time. "Yeah, they are moving something big. Could be a weapon, could be a pack of designer shoes. But either way, it's got enough muscle behind it to make us a footnote in history." "Great," Riker muttered, adjusting a dial with the delicacy of a man defusing a bomb. "We're up against a cosmic fashionista." "All right, enough chit-chat," Marlowe cut in, her tone brooking no argument. "Riker, how soon can you have the generator ready?" Riker shrugged, a universal gesture of uncertainty. "With enough duct tape and prayer, 10 minutes. "Make it 5, Marlowe replied, her authority as solid as the rusted steel above their heads. Lena leaned back, the datapad finally resting on her lap. "You really think this plan of yours is going to work, Marlowe?" Marlowe's lips curled into a half-smile, half-snarl. "It's not about thinking it'll work. It's about making damn sure it does." "Words to die by," Lena remarked, her voice laced with enough sarcasm to drown a small planet. As Riker tinkered, Lena delved back into her datapad, fingers dancing like a pianist on a caffeine high. The chatter grew more frantic as they approached Zero Ior, hints of a massive operation forming a tangled web of data. The Council's plans were more intricate than a politician's expense report, but Lena was unwinding it thread by thread. "Got it," she finally announced, a hint of triumph in her voice. They're moving a fleet to Europa, but it's not just a transport, it's a tactical strike. Marlowe's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. Perfect. That's our target then. Lovely, Riker chimed in, casting a baleful glance at his machinations. Nothing like shooting a bigger target to make us feel like ants with laser pointers. Less complaining, more engineering, Riker, Marlowe retorted, then turned to Lena. Can we use this? Make it look like they're the instigators. Lena nodded, a grin spreading across her face like wildfire in a dry season. With a little creative editing, we can make it seem like they're gearing up to attack first. Should buy us the time we need. Then let's paint a pretty picture, Marlowe said, her voice brimming with resolve. They worked in a synchronized frenzy, the bunker alive with the sounds of clattering tools and rapid keystrokes. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a strategic chess game where the pieces were made of flesh and bone, and the stakes were higher than a Martian high-rise. Marlowe coordinated with the precision of a conductor guiding an orchestra of chaos. Lena's fingers flew over her datapad, weaving a narrative that would implicate the Council as provocateurs. Riker's hands moved with deft certainty, each adjustment to the generator bringing them closer to their make-or-break moment. "Okay, Riker, time for your masterpiece," Marlowe said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Masterpiece. More like finger painting with dynamite, Riker quipped, though his hands didn't falter. "Let's hope you've got a steady hand," Lena muttered, eyes glued to her screen. With a flick of a switch and a silent prayer to whatever gods watched over wayward technicians, Riker activated the subspace interference generator. The machine shuddered, its hum escalating to a roar that echoed through the bunker like an angry beast. "Here we go," Marlowe announced, her voice cutting through the din. "Lena, broadcast our little fiction. Make sure it looks convincing." "Consider it done," Lena replied, her focus unwavering as she sent the doctored transmissions into the ether. The bunker became a pressure cooker of tension and anticipation, each second stretching into an eternity as they waited for the Council's response. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the generator working its magic. Then, like a bolt from the blue, the Council's comms lit up with activity. Lena's screen flashed with an incoming transmission, and she quickly patched it through the holographic display. "Well, look who decided to call," Riker said, his voice laced with sardonic amusement. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of a Council representative. His expression was a masterclass in disdain, the kind usually reserved for finding a rat in one's soup. "Earth," the representative intoned, the word dripping with condescension. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" "Just enjoying a quiet evening and a bit of light interference," Marlowe replied, her tone as casual as if she were discussing the weather. "Heard you've been up to some interesting moves." The representative's face twisted into an expression that could curdle milk. "Your actions are a direct violation of interstellar protocol. Funny, didn't see any protocol about your fleet heading our way uninvited," Marlowe countered, her grin pure mischief. "That was a defensive maneuver," the representative sputtered, visibly losing his cool. "Defensive, sure," Lena chimed in, nodding at Marlowe. "And I'm sure those warheads are just for show." The representative's eyes narrowed, the wheels clearly turning as he processed the implications. "This is a grave mistake or strategic brilliance." "Hard to say," Riker added, not missing a beat. The representative's image flickered, the connection wavering. "Cease this interference immediately or face the consequences." "Consequences," Marlowe repeated, feigning innocence. "I thought we were just having a friendly chat." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving the team alone in the bunker once more. The silence was punctuated by the generator's steady hum, a testament to their audacity. "Think we rattled them?" Riker asked, the hint of a grin playing on his lips. "Oh, we did more than rattle them," Lena replied, her own smile reflecting a shared sense of victory. "We just might have pulled this off," Marlowe exhaled, the tension slowly draining from her shoulders. "Let's not start celebrating until the fat lady sings." As if on cue, Lena's datapad beeped with an incoming message. She scanned it quickly, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Well, I'll be damned," Lena said, her voice tinged with awe. "The council's pulling back. They're lifting the sanctions. Looks like we had our cake and ate it too," Riker remarked, leaning against the generator with a satisfied sigh. Marlowe allowed herself a small smile, the first genuine one in what felt like eons. "We did it. We actually did it." The bunker seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The oppressive weight of impending doom finally lifted. The sanctions that had strangled Earth's resources were gone, the threat of annihilation averted by their cunning and resolve. "Guess this means we don't have to ration the chocolate anymore," Riker said, his tone light with newfound hope. "Or the toilet paper," Lena added, the quip eliciting a chuckle from Marlowe. They stood together, a ragtag team of misfits who had defied the odds and written their own story in the annals of history. It wasn't just a victory. It was proof that even in the darkest corners of space, humanity's greatest weapon was its indomitable spirit. "So what's next?" Lena asked, looking to Marlowe with anticipation. "Next," Marlowe echoed, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "We rebuild, we prepare." Because knowing the universe, there's always another battle on the horizon. "Here's hoping the next one's a little less catastrophic," Riker said, pushing off from the generator with a grin. They laughed, the sound echoing through the bunker and into the vast unknown. It was the sound of defiance, of resilience, of a team who had learned to laugh in the face of adversity and make the impossible possible. And as they stood there, bathed in the flickering glow of their success, they knew one thing for certain. They might be down, but they were far from out. The galaxy was their playground, and they were just getting started. The bunker, once a buzzing hive of frantic activity and whispered desperation, now felt oddly serene in the wake of their unlikely triumph. The generator continued its low, steady hum, a reminder of the chaos they had narrowly sidestepped. Marlowe leaned against a control panel, her eyes scanning the room as if she expected some cosmic joke to come crashing down. After all, the universe had a way of handing out victories that came with a hidden price tag. "Well, we survived," Marlowe said, breaking the silence with a voice laced with relief and disbelief. "Anybody else feel like we just ripped off the galaxy's worst loan shark?" Riker laughed, the sound a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. "At least we didn't have to pawn off a kidney this time," he quipped, wiping the sweat from his brow with the back of his sleeve. "Though I was getting close to considering it." Lena, still glued to her datapad, snorted at their banter. Her fingers danced over the screen, ensuring their fabricated story had spread far and wide enough to deter any immediate council vengeance. "You know, I was half expecting them to call our bluff. Guess the universe really does love a good scandal. Sometimes it's all about who spins the best yarn," Marlowe said, her gaze drifting towards the ceiling. "We just happened to weave a masterpiece." The trio fell into a comfortable silence, each lost in their thoughts. Their plan had worked, and Earth had wrestled free from the Council's crushing sanctions, if only for the moment. But Marlowe knew better than to assume the war was over. Peace was a temporary state in the galaxy, as fragile as an eggshell under a hammer. "So what do we do now?" Riker asked, his voice cutting through the quiet like a pebble skimming across water. "Throw a party. We could use a good reason to crack open that last bottle of synth wine." Lena shook her head, a smirk tugging at her lips. "You call that stuff wine? It's more like rocket fuel with a hint of grape." Marlowe chuckled, her mind already shifting gears to what lay ahead. "Celebrations can wait. We need to regroup, figure out our next steps. The Council might have backed off, but we need to prepare for the inevitable backlash." Riker nodded, his expression sobering. "You're right. But at least for today we can bask in being the galaxy's most unlikely heroes." "Heroes?" Lena raised an eyebrow, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "More like survivors of a really bad reality show." Marlowe pushed off from the panel, her demeanor shifting from relaxed to resolute. "All right, gather around," she said, a commanding edge in her voice. I need to address Earth's leadership. We can't squander this opportunity by returning to business as usual. As they moved to their makeshift comm station, Marlowe's mind raced with what needed to be said. The leaders of Earth were a notoriously fickle bunch, more concerned with their own interests than the greater good. Convincing them to prioritize peace over petty squabbles would be akin to herding cats with a water gun. The holographic display flickered to life, casting an eerie glow across the bunker as Marlowe opened the channel to Earth's leaders. Their faces popped into view, each lined with the usual mix of skepticism and self-importance that came with the territory. Captain Marlowe Vox drawled a particularly pompous-looking official at the center of the screen. His voice was as oily as a mechanic's rag. "I trust you have a compelling reason for this interruption." Marlowe's smile was all teeth, predatory and unwavering. "Oh, I assure you it's worth your time. We've managed to lift the Council's sanctions, but this is only a temporary reprieve. We need to shift our focus. Fighting among ourselves will only lead to our downfall." Another leader, this one with a face like a bulldog's rear end, leaned forward. "And what do you suggest, Captain Vox? That we hold hands and sing Kumbaya?" "The galaxy doesn't work that way." "You're right," Marlowe agreed, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "The galaxy is a ruthless place, but unless we show a united front, we're nothing more than fodder for the Council's next political maneuver. We need to rebuild, strengthen our defenses, and most importantly, forge alliances that look beyond our little rock." The leaders exchanged glances, doubt flickering across their features. Marlowe knew they were a cautious bunch, always more interested in maintaining the status quo than embracing the unknown. "You expect us to trust that the Council won't simply retaliate once they regroup?" asked a third leader, his voice tinged with skepticism. Marlowe's gaze hardened. "Trust is a luxury we can't afford right now. I'm talking about survival. We've bought ourselves time and we need to use it wisely. The Council's next move will be to assess our capabilities." "Let's give them something to think about." Riker and Lena exchanged a look, quietly supportive as Marlowe held the room's attention. The leaders might be a hard sell, but beneath their layers of bureaucracy and bluster lay a kernel of self-preservation. It was a universal truth. Nobody wanted to be the first to fall. "Fine," the pompous official finally relented, his tone begrudging. "You've made your point. We'll convene and discuss a plan moving forward." Marlowe nodded, her expression softening a fraction. "That's all I ask. Let's not waste this chance." With the discussion concluded, the holographic display winked out, leaving the bunker shrouded in its usual gloom. Marlowe turned to her team, her eyes reflecting both determination and a flicker of hope. "Think they'll actually listen this time?" Lena asked, her voice dripping with doubt. "Who knows?" Marlowe replied with a shrug. "But if we don't try, we're as good as dead already." Riker folded his arms, a crooked grin tugging at his lips. "If nothing else, we've proven that a small group of stubborn misfits can make a difference." "Stubborn, yes. Misfits, definitely," Lena agreed, her tone light. "But don't let it go to your head, Riker," he chuckled, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Hey, I'm just glad we didn't end up a cautionary tale." Marlowe looked at her team, a motley crew of unlikely allies who had come together against the odds. They were far from perfect, but in their imperfections lay their strength. It was a sobering reality, one Marlowe was acutely aware of. "All right, let's get to work," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "We might have dodged a bullet, but we're not out of the woods yet. I want everyone focused on fortifying our defenses and reaching out to potential allies. We need to be ready for whatever the galaxy throws at us next." As her team dispersed to their respective tasks, Marlowe lingered near the generator, its steady hum a comforting reminder of their recent victory. They had struck a blow against the Council and bought themselves time, but Marlowe knew that peace in the galaxy was as fleeting as a shooting star. "What's on your mind, Cap?" Riker asked, sidling up beside her with an easy familiarity. "Just thinking about the future," Marlowe replied, her gaze distant. "We've won a battle, but the war is far from over. Riker nodded, his expression thoughtful. Yeah, but if anyone can pull off the impossible, it's us. Hell, we're living proof that miracles happen. Marlowe chuckled, shaking her head. We might need a few more of those before this is all over. Then let's get to work, Riker said, clapping her on the shoulder before heading back to his station. Marlowe watched him go, a sense of renewed purpose settling over her. They had snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, and now it was time to fight for a better future, one they would forge with blood, sweat, and maybe a little bit of luck. As the bunker buzzed with activity once more, each team member throwing themselves into their roles with tireless dedication, Marlowe allowed herself a moment of reflection. They had come a long way from the brink of despair, and though the road ahead was uncertain, they faced it together. "Hey, Marlowe," Lena called, her voice cutting through the din. "You think the universe will ever give us a break?" Marlowe grinned, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Probably not, but that's half the fun, isn't it?" Lena laughed, shaking her head. "Only you would call this fun." "Guess I'm just an optimist," Marlowe replied, her voice wry. As she turned her attention back to the tasks at hand, Marlowe felt a sense of peace settle over her. It wasn't the end, and their journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like they were finally moving in the right direction. The galaxy was still a dark and dangerous place, but with every step, they were proving that humanity was not just a collection of individuals, but a force to be reckoned with. A species determined to carve out its place in the stars, no matter the cost. In the flickering light of the bunker, Marlowe Vox stood at the helm of a new era, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with her ragtag team of survivors. Together, they would defy the odds, challenging the universe to throw its worst at them, secure in the knowledge that they'd face it all head-on. And maybe, just maybe, they'd even come out on top.